I'm gonna do a loud clap. Hopefully that'll sync it up as we need to be doing. Okay, so maybe, yeah. All right. Hello, my name is Olivia Tucker, and today you will hear about the three sillies. Now, I, like many others, will sometimes get caught up in the way I'm thinking or doing, and I'll do something kind of silly. Like I've put yogurt in the refrigerator before, or I've gotten ready for school on a Saturday. But sometimes also the silliness that I do comes from overthinking something. So, what if I worry about the power going out during a thunderstorm while I'm sleeping? Well, if the power goes out, then my alarm clock won't go off. If my alarm clock won't go off, I'll be late for a meeting at work. And if I'm late for a meeting at work, my bosses won't like me and maybe they'll fire me. And then what will I do? Will I have to become a street performer? Well, I can't juggle, so what am I going to do then? Well, maybe I could be like a statue. Well, that means I have to go find an outfit. So what kind of outfit am I going to do? Well, it can't be too hot because I do live in Florida, and maybe I shouldn't be a street performer with a bunch of makeup because maybe it'll melt off. And then at this point, I've imagined a scenario that will very unlikely happen, and it's very silly of me. Well, stories like this comfort me because at least I know other people are as silly as I am, if not sillier. And I don't know if our gentleman agrees from the story, but this is an English folktale collected by Joseph Jacobs that I am about to tell you that comforts me. There's a couple of other versions of it throughout the world, but this is the one that I wanted to share with you. Without further ado, the three sillies. Once upon a time, there was a farmer, and he had a wife and a daughter, a very pretty daughter. And the daughter had a suitor, a gentleman from town, and it was very agreeable that the gentleman was courting the farmer's daughter. And so very often, in fact, nearly every night, the suitor, the gentleman, would come over to the farmer's house and they would have dinner together. And with dinner, they would have cider. And the daughter always would go down into the cellar to get cider for her family and her gentleman caller. Well, one day, she was doing everything like she normally did. She was going down into the cellar to get some cider. And as she was pouring some of the cider, she was looking around her cellar kind of aimlessly, and she spotted on a beam up tall a mallet. Now the mallet had been there for a while. It was dusty, there were cobwebs on it. But she sees that mallet and it sparks a vision to her. And she starts to imagine, well, what if the gentleman and her, they do get married and they have a son, and the son grows up, and the son, well, he does just what she's doing. He goes down into the cellar to pour cider for his family and maybe an intended. But one day the mallet drops on his head and he dies. And she thinks about this and she's so upset. She bursts into tears and she sits down on a cask in the cellar and she just starts crying, and she is getting her face wet with her salty tears and the floor of the cellar wet with the cider that's still pouring. Well, she's been taking quite a while doing all of this. So those upstairs, the farmer, his wife, and the gentleman, are wondering why she's taking so long. So the mother goes down to investigate. She goes down to the cellar to see her daughter. And the daughter is there crying, just crying on the cask. And the mother's like, oh my goodness, what happened? And the daughter goes, oh, that horrid mallet. Mom, what if one day me and the gentleman, we get married and we have a son, and the son grows up, and the son one day, he, just like I am right now, comes down to the cellar to get some cider for his family and maybe a guest, and he's here and the mallet falls on him and he dies. And the mother, she goes, oh darling, oh, that is upsetting. Oh no, that's so horrid. And she sits down with her daughter on the cask and she starts crying too. well, now both of the women are gone. And so upstairs, the father's like, I'll go check on them. And he goes down into the cellar and he sees the two women in his life sitting on a cast, cider pouring on the ground, tears pouring on their faces. And he's just like, what's good grief? What's happening? What's the matter? And the mother goes, oh, it's that horrid mallet. Oh, husband, what if one day our daughter, what if she marries the gentleman? And what if her and the gentleman, they have a son, and the son, he grows up and he goes down into the cellar just like our daughter is now. And what if the mallet falls down, hits him on the head, and he dies? Oh. And the father, the farmer, he goes, oh, good grief. Oh, that is upsetting. Oh. And he sits down with his wife and his daughter on the cast in the cellar, and he starts crying. Well, now the gentleman's waited for all three members of this family to go down to the cellar, and he's like, what is going on? He's lost what little patience he has, but he goes down to investigate, and as he goes down, he sees this giant puddle of cider, and in the middle of it, on the cast, is the farmer, his wife, and the daughter all weeping uncontrollably. Well, he immediately goes off, shuts the faucet on the cast, so the cider's no longer pouring out, and he faces the three of them, and he's just like, what's happening? Are you okay? What's going on? Why are you three all sobbing here? And all three of them together go, oh, that mallet. Oh, what if one day you and her, they get married and you have a son, and the son grows up and the son comes down into the cellar just like our daughter, just like I am. And he's here and the mallet falls on his head and it just kills him dead. Oh. Well, as all three of them are telling the gentleman the story, he starts very concerned looking at them, and he moves to astonished looking at them while they're telling the story. And once they finish all of their words and continue with their sobbing, he throws his head back and he laughs. And he laughs so hard. He gets stitches in the side and he can't breathe, and he's just laughing so hard. And when he finally catches his breath, he goes, oh, I've traveled a lot in my years. I've gone far and wide. And in my travels, I have never met three people as silly as you three. You must be the three biggest sillies in the whole world. And I can't really marry one of the three biggest sillies in the world. So I'm gonna have to go back out into the world. And if I meet three people sillier than you lot, I will come back and marry your daughter. But until then, this is farewell. He thanks them for their hospitality over the few weeks, and he leaves that night. Well, the gentleman travels, and he travels, and he travels, and he travels, and he doesn't meet anyone sillier than these three for a while. So he's keeping on his promise, just keeping on going out. But one day, he is in a village and he passes a cottage. Hang on. Maybe, is it just you? Okay. Well, one day he passes a cottage with an old woman, owned by an old woman, and it's like a low cottage, but there's like a grass roof. So there's grass growing on the roof, and he passes it and he sees the strangest sight. He sees a woman at the bottom of a ladder that's leaning against this cottage, and she, it appears to be, is bullying a cow to go up the ladder to the roof. And he pauses and he asks, what is she up to? And the woman goes, oh, there's all that grass growing on my roof, and I just need to get my cow up to the roof. He'll eat the grass. While I let him graze there, don't worry, I'm gonna tie a rope around the grass. I'm gonna drop the rope down my chimney, and I'm gonna tie that rope to my wrist so I can do some cleaning while he's grazing on my roof. And he looks at the roof and he looks at her and he's like, ma'am, why don't you trim the grass on the roof and then pile it down for your cow to eat? That might be a little bit better than putting the cow on the roof and then tying yourself to the cow through the chimney. Well, she didn't like that answer. She's like, well, what do you know? What do you know? How do you know how to run my home? No, this is going to work just fine. We're going to get the cow up. It's going to be fine. I don't need your advice. And so she continues to bully and badger, cajole, prod her cow, as she gets hot and sweaty and irritated, and the cow is getting more flustered and obstinate. But eventually she does it. She bullies that cow up the ladder onto the roof. She ties a rope around him, drops the rope down the chimney. She goes into her house, ties the rope around her wrist, and carries on with her chores. And while the gentleman goes, oh, that is the silliest person I've ever met. One down. One sillier than those three. And as he's about to step away, he turns his whole body away and he hears a crash and the cow is falling down and oh gosh, the woman is screaming up through the chimney, and thankfully he rushes in, he trims the rope in time as she's just a little banged up and suited up, but her pride is as bruised as she is, and he gets yelled out of that joint pretty quickly. So he goes back on his travels. He's found one sillier person than those three sillies. And he travels. He still has to wait a long time before he encounters anybody as silly as her or those three original. But eventually he has to stay at an inn, and the inn is very full. It's a very busy road, and so he has to bunk with a stranger. And honestly, they have a lovely time. It's so easy to talk to this strange traveler. They have a lovely dinner together. They're great roommates for the night. But in the morning, as they're getting ready for the day, our gentleman watches as the man hangs up his trousers between the knob of a dresser and the knob of a bed, so they're kind of like hanging loose. And then this man proceeds to walk all the way to the other side of the room, turn around, and then do a running jump for those trousers. And he misses. He doesn't quite land in them. So he goes back to the other side of the room, and he runs for the trousers and he misses them. And he does this over and over again. And this gentleman is just watching this stranger try to jump into his own pants for almost an hour. And it is just so funny to the gentleman. Oh, he thinks it's a comedy, but this is something you would see a street performer do. Oh, it's just so funny. And he's just dying of laughter. Finally, the stranger, he goes, this is funny to you, I know, but this is the hardest part of my day. I don't know how you get into your trousers so easy. It takes me forever, the better part of an hour to get in. And our gentleman, he goes, sir, let me show you a trick. And he demonstrates to the stranger how he takes his trousers in his hands and one leg at a time get in them. Oh, the stranger's so thankful. He was like, oh, I never would have thought it. Never in a million years would have thought of that. No wonder it took you so quickly to get ready for the day. Ah, thank you. And the gentleman goes, well, that's two down. Two of the silliest people I've ever met. Only one more to go. And he goes back on the road. And he travels for quite some time. And it still is a long time before he meets a third biggest silly in the world. Till one day, it's late at night and he's just making it to the next village. And as he's approaching the village, he notices that most of the villagers of this town seem to be around a pond just outside of the village. And oh gosh, they've got all these tools. They've got rakes, they've got pitchforks, and they've got brooms. and they're all like calling out to each other, and there's these sounds of frustration and work. And so the gentleman approaches them and he's like, well, what's happening? And one of the villagers says, this is a very stressful situation, but you see the moon fell into the pond and we've got to get her out, but nothing we're doing is getting the moon out of the pond. And oh gosh, what are we gonna do? The moon can't stay in there forever, but we're trying. Everyone's got their pitchforks and rakes and we're really trying to rake that moon out of there, but it's not working, sir. We don't know what we're gonna do. And the gentleman looks at the townspeople who are in fact using all of their rakes and pitchforks and brooms to either try to like scrape it out of the pond or sweep it out of the pond. But in fact, the image that they're working on is merely the reflection of the moon that is in the sky. Oh. So they're not gonna get it done. And the gentleman, he laughs and he goes, oh, you sillies. The moon's not in the pond. She's still up in the sky. Go ahead and look. They didn't like to hear that after all of their hard work. So they were like, what are you talking about? No, we're getting the moon out of the pond. We don't need your help. And the gentleman goes, no, you don't need to get the moon out of the pond. If you would look up, she's there. She's in the sky still. Well, the villagers were grumbling at this because they've been huffing and puffing at this for quite some time. And this gentleman just comes in from out of town and says, oh, you guys are idiots. You don't know how to get a moon out of your pond. It's not in the pond. Well, they start getting mad. And this guy just telling them what to do and telling them that they're idiots. So they start throwing it back at him, and they start shaking their pitchforks and their rakes and their brooms. Not at the pond anymore, but at him. And they abuse him so much that he just gets out. He's like, I don't need to stay in this village. He just pitches a tent somewhere in the woods and he's like, that's good enough. And as he's laying there, he realizes, well, that's 3. That's more than 3 of the biggest sillies in the world. You know, he's going to go back. He's going to go back to the farmer and his wife and their pretty daughter. And he will, in fact, marry the daughter. And he does. He goes back and he sees the family again. He greets them and they get married. And you know, if they don't live happily ever after, that's not the story anyway. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful night.